Here's a look at the Race to Dubai rankings. You see Rory McIlroy strengthened his position at the top thanks to his tie for third on Sunday in Abu Dhabi, commanding lead going into this final event of the season. Rory is seeking his 6th career Race to Dubai title, which would tie him with Seve Ballesteros on the all-time list and move him to just 2 behind Colin Montgomery, who holds the record with 8 Order of Merit titles. Rory spoke to the media earlier today in Dubai and gave his assessment of his season.
Yeah, incredibly consistent again. You know, I think I've been really proud of that over the last few years. But then at the same time, you know, thinking about the ones that got away, you know, I should be sitting up here with a 5th major title, and I'm not. So that, you know, that stings, and that's something that, you know, I've had to come to terms with. But at the same time, you know, I've got plenty more opportunities in the future. But I've really just tried to focus on the positives of this year of, you know, consistently performing at the highest level. You know, still having 3 wins with an opportunity to get a 4th here this week, you know, to win another Race to Dubai title. You know, did I achieve every goal I set myself this year? Probably not, but I still consider it a successful season. You know, you've got 2 guys at the top of the world rankings, Xander winning 2 majors, you know, Scotty winning a Masters and a Players, and, you know, the Olympics. You know, they certainly separated themselves from the pack this year, and I'm obviously very aware of that, and, you know, only makes me more motivated to you know, to try to emulate what they did this year.
If you were dishing out grades, what would you give yourself?
It would be a pass. It wouldn't be pass with flying colours, but probably a B.
I suppose that's a sign of the standards that Rory McIlroy sets himself, that a year in which he won 3 times, starting in Dubai earlier in the year, and then he won, obviously, the truest at Quail Hollow and the Zurich with Shane Lowry, and yet it's a B. That's a career year for a lot of people, but I suppose it's just tantamount to the fact that metrics that he is judged by now are major championships. It's the metric he judges himself by.
And I think that's fair. And look, he's always going to be the toughest on himself. We've seen that throughout the course of his entire career, where you would look at that season and ask yourself that if that's a B, I'm never getting a passing grade going forward. But when it comes to Rory and his expectations, and certainly you can see the sting of Pinehurst is still there. You and I are going to talk about it. He's going to hear about it for a long time. I would be curious the first time we see him next season, wherever that might be, ask him the same question, because my guess is he's probably become a little bit easier on himself. He has a tendency to put things in perspective the further he gets from him. But yeah, I think when you talk about Rory, it's the major championships that matter.
And he did mention the near misses there, the ones that got away. And there were quite a few of them when you think back on it. Obviously, the Irish Open got away from him at the end. The Olympics got away from him. The US Open got away from him. Wentworth, Billy Horschel, obviously made that bomb in the playoff for an eagle to beat him. So there was a lot of disappointment in this year for Rory McIlroy as well. But I mean, I had a conversation with him once where I remember he said, if you set the bar low, you'll never be disappointed. So he's obviously setting a bar high enough where disappointment comes with the territory. And he's got a lot of disappointment this year. And that's been the case over the last couple of years. You can go back even to, say, LACC for the US Open last year. You go back to St Andrews in 2022 and the Open that got away from him there. There's a lot of disappointment. At a certain point, you can see the frustration coming out in him as well. And I think that's something he's really going to have to reconcile before he starts a new campaign next year, because that's the nature of this sport. You get knocked down, you get up, and you move on to the next one.
Now, as someone who carries notebooks for a living, I don't think anyone has a better relationship with Rory than you do. Do you believe that he sets the bar low, or was that just him?
Oh, no, he said, he was actually talking about me setting the bar low for myself, but he doesn't set a bar low for himself. I think he sets a bar so high that he's invariably going to disappoint himself, because it's a bar that mortals just generally don't reach. I mean, I can't imagine that Scotty Scheffler sets a bar for himself pretty low every year as well. None of these guys do. That's what drives them, and certainly what drives Rory McIlroy, even with 3 wins, it's still just a B for him.
And I think we had this conversation last week about some of the things he worked on in those 3 weeks since his last start. I believe it was at the Dunhill, where he locked himself in that lab, didn't look at the ball flight, tried to do something a little bit different. And I'm taken by the idea that I appreciate his constant search for success, to get 1% better. That's what makes him Rory McIlroy. But that's not what held him back this year. I always contend that it was his short game and his putting that held him back more so than anything he did with his swing. But you can appreciate what he's doing.
Yeah, well, there's certainly a lot of us would like to lock ourselves in a dark room and not actually see where the ball flight is going.